Okay, so we have finished all 21 proverbs in Mitchie's book, Opening Concepts, and I'm going to, for my own study, going to keep moving with the opening. As I've said to you on many occasions in these videos, it's just it strikes me as so obvious that we play the opening in every game. There's such capacity to get better at it. As Bill Robertie says in this book we're going to look at, he says, in the opening you rarely make mega blunders because the positions haven't established yet. Home boards aren't strong, so you don't tend to make mega blunders, but you can make an awful lot of medium to smallish errors that cost you. And it's just something we can avoid, and we play the opening in every single game, so let's get good at it. So for me, I'm going to keep going on studying how to play the opening in Backgammon, but I'm conscious that it could be getting a bit too deep for some Wicklow Backgammon members and getting a little bit too heavy. So I'm going to release two sets of videos simultaneously over the course of the next couple of months. I'm going to, in a previous study group, I went through and made videos about another Mitchie book, his Endgame Technique book. So I'm going to start sharing those videos on the Wicklow Backgammon YouTube site, and I'm also going to plough on myself through Bill Robertie's books, How to Play the Opening in Backgammon, because Robertie has produced 3 books about how to play the opening, and I have to say I absolutely flipping love them. They are a mine of detail. They are absolutely, I won't be able to give you more than just a little taster of them because there's so much information and detail in them that we'd be here till 2032 if I was making videos of every single thing that was in it. They're stunning. But I said 3 books, and really there could be one book with 15 chapters because that's how he kind of lays them out. And if you look at, for instance, chapter 6 there, he literally goes down through point by point, the 3-point. Are we better off making our 3-point here with a certain position, or are we better off doing something else? And then he moves on to, are we better off making the 22-point or doing something else? And my intention is to become masterful at the opening, and I think these books will be a big kind of step on it. I have to say as well, there's so much in these books, and as I said, I won't be able to go through every single position with you, but for me, what I've done is I'm taking these books and I'm making each position into a little flash card for myself so that I can just keep checking, am I playing the right move here? And one day I'm going to be stunning. And this first chapter, this video is going to look at basically the introduction, and then chapter 1, the opening move. And you wouldn't believe it, but I was very much reminded of probably one of my favourite rugby player ever, Paul O'Connell, the Irish captain, as I kind of read through the early chapters of the first of Bill Robertie's books. And you might say, well, look, what does rugby have to do with backgammon? But it's a quote, a mantra from Paul O'Connell that has always stuck with me. I think I've mentioned before, I did a lot of sports coaching and I was struck with this. Well, Paul O'Connell went from being Irish captain to being Lions captain. And the coach of the Lions kind of asked him, they met and they kind of talked about the spirit of the Lions tour and what they were going to do. Paul O'Connell said, well, look, here's a little thing I've always used. It's this quote, let's be the best at everything that requires no talent. And Warren Gatland, the coach, and I, just as I did when I first heard this, laughed, and he didn't get it, because I have to admit, when I first heard this, I thought, oh, that's very funny, like we're the most untalented bunch of people ever, and let's specialise at being untalented. But Paul O'Connell kind of went back and said, no, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying, and this applies to backgammon every bit as much as it does to rugby, he said, we fixate that some players are more talented than us. But there's so many things that happen in the game of backgammon, in the game of rugby, that don't require talent. So we look at Mitchie and Dirk Sheeman and Mochi and think, God, they're so talented. And they are. But there's so many things that we can do that don't require talent that can make us better players. And that's what Paul O'Connell was getting at. Let's just get the basics, simple preparations right, and we'll be better players for it. So I kind of was thinking about it and trying to think, well, what do rugby and backgammon have in common when it comes to things that require no talent? Well, being ready and prepared for your matches. I was, as I said, a very involved sports coach. I can't get over when I go to backgammon tournaments how many people are sitting around having pints and having the chats, surely the guys you take it seriously and you start getting ready, even just starting to have some sort of little warm up routine. If you're playing online, worth playing a match or two beforehand. If you're playing live, if you play a lot of online and you go to a live tournament, you need to play some live backgammon, just get used to playing over a board again. So that's the idea of being ready. Planning your approach to each match, what I'm going to have to do here to win. Are you playing a stronger player that you need to be a bit more aggressive with the cube? Are you do you know the player? Do you know what they're like? Are they, sometimes you can play a player who coughs and smokes and slobbers everywhere, and you don't like playing that person. So you need to be ready to what you're going to be playing. Obviously, just as in rugby, you need disciplined, regular training. We do in backgammon. If we want to be good at backgammon, we need to be doing our training, the study of what's, the different positions, analysis of how we've played. I used to always do a lot of video analysis with my rugby teams. After a game, you'd look at the match and see, well, what worked, what didn't. It's exactly the same with the backgammon match. And the final thing that really stood out for me then is learning the moves. With my rugby teams, I'd take them away for a week at the start of the season. And by the time we came back, not only had we bonded as a team, but they knew all the set plays inside out and back to front. And there was no excuse for the whole season. When we called a play, we knew they knew it. And it's exactly the same with backgammon, that with the opening rows, there's no excuse. This first chapter is about just the initial opening row. There's only 15 of them. There's no excuse not to know them perfectly and know when to play the different variants if needs be, according to match score and things. I also think, look, there's only 15 open rows. The second video in the second chapter of the book looks at the second row, and you go straight away from 15 up to, some analysts would say, 630 second rows. But again, with a bit of work, we can get good at the second row as well. It doesn't require talent. It just requires a bit of work. And so that's why this Paul O'Connell mantra really stood out for me as I read this. I was kind of reading through Bill Robertie's book thinking, this isn't about me being a genius or having the memory of an elephant or anything like that. This is just doing the damn work, learning the opening rows and kind of slogging my way through it. And it doesn't require talent. It requires just doing the damn work. So I just thought I'd mention that. The opening introduction, I suppose, to this book sees Bill Robertie talking about what he calls a financial. He says, look, we're used to a rules-based model of backgammon, and he sees it as financial model of backgammon. I'm not sure if this is profound or makes a difference, but it's an interesting way of looking at it. So he said, we have to look at, well, what are our assets and what are our liabilities, and we kind of weigh them up in each position. So just kind of looking at the very start, he goes through the very start and says, well, look, that's our 6 point. As usual, we're going anti-clockwise around the board and bearing into the bottom right. Having our 6 point is the greatest asset we can have. We obsess about our 5 point, but that's only because we already have our 6 point. So 2 checkers there makes our 6 point. That's a huge asset. A third one gives us flexibility. A fourth checker on our 6 point is still an asset. But to stick the 5th checker on, I would personally see that as it's not as useful an asset. It's a pretty redundant asset. But Bill Robertie says, no, that's now a liability because you've got to unstack that point or you become very inflexible. So you can see that 5th checker as a useless, not very valuable asset, or you can do the Bill Robertie and see it as an absolute liability. Same thing happens, our 8 point is great. Having 2 checkers and our 8 point makes it a major asset. Having a 3rd checker there is a huge asset. We don't want to strip our 8 point because it leaves us very lacking ammunition to hit people later on. So if we can even put a 4th checker on our 8 point, that's good. That's an asset because we can hit with that and still not have stripped our 8 point. But again, put a 5th one on and it's turning into a liability. And it's the same pattern on our midpoint. It's great having a midpoint, huge asset. Don't strip your midpoint. So that 3rd checker don't strip your midpoint. That's what Mitchie said. That 3rd checker is an asset. Having a 4th one there allows you to hit and still not have stripped your midpoint. But the 5th one is a liability because we've got to get it moving sooner or later. And finally, our back 2 checkers are both liabilities. They're the problem. We're trying to escape those 2 back checkers. In Bill Robertie's terms, they are 2 huge liabilities we have to try and avoid. Now, if we could take those 2 back checkers and move them forward, suddenly we've got a holding point there, a great advanced anchor. The advanced anchor is a huge asset. So we've turned our liabilities into a huge asset, and that's why making the advanced anchor so important. And even if we were to, split the back, and now what we've done is we've taken our liability, and it's still a liability, but it's less of a liability, and it's starting to show promise of being an asset. Finally, in this sort of analysis, Bill Robertie takes kind of the checker in the midpoint and said, if we could bring one of them down, we now have a builder, and that builder is an asset. It's covering positions for us, and if we can cover it, we've made another point in our outer board. And the best asset in terms of builders is the builder on our 9 point, because it's the most flexible builder. It allows us to make the most different range of points, and that is an asset to us. Now, it's a bit of a liability. It's there waiting to be hit, so it's not 100% a wonderful asset, but it's still of use to us there. And he takes this analysis and shows a position and kind of goes through this position, and I think it's quite instructive. We opened with a 3-1 and made our 5 point. Black opened with a 3-1 and made their 5 point, and now we've rolled a 5-3. And he kind of says, well, what could you do? Well, you could play in from 8 to 3 and 6 to 3 and make our 3 point. That gives us a stronger home board, which is a good asset. We've made our 3 point, which is an asset. We've abandoned our 8 point, and he discusses, he gives a little bit of treatment to that blot on the 8 point and says, well, look, it's a bit of a liability in that it could be hit with a 6-1 or a 5-2, a 4-3. So there's 4 rolls that will hit it. But if we don't get hit, we can try and cover that next go. So he says, he nets it out and says that the net result is that it's probably a bit of an asset having it there still. But it's not as strong as it was when it was when he was second checker on that 8 point. So we've improved our position here by playing 5 to 3 like that. But Bill Robertie says we have, but we haven't. Look at our midpoint and our 24 point. What's happened there? Absolutely nothing. And he comes up with an interesting quote that I think it really kind of struck me. The deeper into the game you go with an unaddressed liability, the more serious it tends to become. So in this situation here, we have done nothing to unstack our midpoint. We've done nothing to advance our back checker. So yes, we've improved our balance sheet slightly by playing and making our 3 point. But is there something stronger we can do? Well, yes, we can use the 5 to unstack our midpoint. So we can come down 13-8 with the 5. You could trundle that forward from the 8 point to our 5 point, but that's doing nothing. That's taking the asset of the spare checker on the 8 point and moving to the 5 point. It achieves nothing. So that's really going to be no use. So you could say, well, we can continue to address our liability in our midpoint by bringing another checker down with the 3. That blot now in our 10 point definitely is an asset. Now Black could roll a 6-3, and that, in fact, that's the only thing that'll hit it. 6-3. So Black could roll a 6-3 and hit it. So the tiny liability value, but huge value as a builder there as well for the next go. So we've improved our position there more by coming down 13-8 and 13-10. But look at the top right again. We've done nothing with our major liability, which is the checkers on the 24 points. So if we put that back there, we could instead do a big reduction of our liability by playing 24-21 and advancing one of our back checkers. And he just compares the two positions. He says, this position here, yes, we're strong in assets, but we haven't really achieved much. And our liability on the top right is getting bigger and bigger with every go. So instead, we're better off playing 24-21, reducing a liability. We've already reduced the liability on the 13 point. And if we can cover that blot, if we can cover our 21 point, the advanced anchor becomes a big asset. And therefore, that's the right move. Okay, I'm going to do a slight change to what I had planned. I thought I was going to do one video about the introduction in chapter 1, but this video is already long enough. So what I'm going to do is just kind of call it here that was what Bill Robertie has in his introduction, and I'll do a second video about chapter 1, which is the opening move. And just bear with it. In some of the slides of this video, I've talked about the next roll. We'll be looking at the response to the opening roll. That's actually going to be our third video in the series now. I just think it's better to have shorter, sweeter videos. So what you've heard here is the chapter on, the introduction to Bill Robertie's series. And then I'm going to release another video very shortly with the chapter 1, which is about the opening move.